Tearsheet. We are about to jump into our second panel of this three-day conference. We have Nathaniel Harley, Duane Good, and Betsy Eisenberg joining us. If you were with us yesterday, we did have a little bit of an issue. Of course, you can't have a live event without having a little issue about name conventions and bringing people on. So just bear with us as we bring our panelists onto the screen. Looks like we're good to go. Since Duane made it on first, let's start with Duane. I'd like you just to spend each a minute and introduce yourselves and your organizations. So Duane, would you like to go first?
Yeah, great. Thanks. Hi, Duane Good, here in California today. And I'm with Tribal Credit. We focus on helping startups in emerging markets and have recently launched a couple of new products. And I've been in banking and cards and payments for a long time. I spent many years with several of the largest card issuers and did a lot of work in global banking in this space. And then have spent the last several years really working heavily in the startup space here in Silicon Valley. Great.
Thanks for joining us. Betsy, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure thing. I'm Betsy Eisenberg. I lead partner success at Akoya. Akoya is a data access network. We're building an ecosystem to connect data recipients and data providers, and to do so in a way where we solve the problem of folks who want to share their data with a third-party tool, and yet want to do so without using or giving anybody their ID and password. So our mission is to remove the login credentials from the market so that I can share my data with a third party to use so many of the awesome tools that are available, but to do so without giving up my ID and password. We were spun out of Fidelity, having been incubated within Fidelity. We spun out back in February and are now jointly owned by Fidelity and 11 other US retail banks. So.
Great. And Nathaniel?
Hey guys, how's everyone doing? I'm Nathaniel, CEO and co-founder of Mantl. Mantl is essentially an enterprise software company that really helps the regional and community banks grow deposits in their customer base. Our flagship product is something called account opening, and you can kind of think about it as Shopify for banks in many ways. So what Shopify did, where they sort of took the retail and e-commerce industry from a primarily brick and mortar physical existence into the online space, that's exactly what we are doing for banks and really helping reimagine the digital storefront and customer experience for our banks.
Awesome. Welcome, Nathaniel. And one thing that ties these three people together, besides being terrifically talented and experienced professionals, they are all opinion makers. They are all members of our Outlier program. And as part of that, they're participating in this panel today. They're also, their opinions and their commentary shows up from time to time on Tearsheet, both on our website and on our newsletters. So thank you guys for joining us. We'll hop into the formal part of our panel after we squared away everything. So I want to start with Betsy. What do you think has changed during the crisis? So I have a series of questions. They're broad enough that they're boring, but they're also open enough, I think, where we can get a good conversation going. So also feel free when you do respond, if someone else has responded before you, to agree or disagree with them as well. This is just to generate conversation. So Betsy, what do you think has changed during the crisis?
Everything. Definitely have a new normal, which is wearing a mask and staying home. But I think that, we're going through unprecedented times. First and foremost, we need to take into consideration security and health and all those good things. But I think also when we start thinking about our industry, I think the coronavirus and the scenarios that we're going through right now really are going to prove a catalyst or turning point for open finance. Bank branches are closed, or people have stay-at-home orders and they're not going to a bank branch. And so the online channels are really the only, they went from being kind of the convenient way for consumers to manage their finances to be almost the only way to manage your finances. And I think that we need to be mindful of that. We've seen research that says 63% of people are now much more inclined to try a new mobile or online service than they were before COVID-19. Similarly, when we look to Europe, where they do have open banking, open finance, they have seen a 72% increase in the usage of fintech apps. And so when we think about, well, what's happening here, it gives me, it makes me see that, well, this may be that hinge point or tipping point for open finance to be embraced, where we really give consumers and individuals that ability to give their consent to share their data and really facilitate that flow. And that then begets some of the other issues, I think, because in this time also, we're probably seeing and we're hearing it from the partners we work with, really unprecedented volumes on the digital properties of the financial websites. People are trading more, they're looking at their accounts more, they're checking to see their balances, they're checking to see if they got their stimulus check or their unemployment benefit, or just generally looking at, okay, what does the money look like today? And that's putting a lot of overload on these digital properties. And then you also start thinking about, okay, well, those digital properties are the same place where third parties are going also. And so I think we're finding that the aggregators and the fintechs that rely on going to the bank's digital sites or the broker's digital sites are becoming almost like the first victim in a pretty vicious cycle, in that they are getting interrupted on their service because the banks are getting overloaded on capacity. And so they're trying really hard to cater to their direct customers, while at the same time make sure their direct customers have access to their data. And then you've got the bots and whatnot coming in to pull down data. So I think, are at that point from a transformation perspective, and likely one that no one had on their 2020 roadmap in terms of the coronavirus driving that transformation, around how do we make sure that as a consumer of XYZ bank, I can go to that digital property, but if I'm using a fintech to do planning or budgeting or pay the babysitter, whatever it might be, that I can securely see and get my data going in there as well. And so I think we need to be focused on, how do we provide that reliable access? How do we get folks the data that they need? How do we ensure that we do it with a secure and transparent way? And I think that, that then comes back to where Akoya is very focused on solving for credentials and moving us towards tokenized flows of data and the use of APIs.
Amazing. And it's so interesting how we've heard from so many speakers throughout this week of the pandemic is really just accelerating a lot of the same trends that have been in place, from before. It's just interesting how that's acting as a linchpin. Nathaniel, what about you?
Yeah, so I would totally agree. I think that the need for digitization and the pressure to digitize is 100% front and center. And look, I think at the end of the day, financial institutions can't really build resilience without embracing these digital channels. And look, I think the realization was these digital channels are honestly the only way to ensure safety, accessibility, better customer experience. And I think what we saw, especially, during the initial waves of the pandemic, was that the backup plans that a lot of these financial institutions had in place were really rooted in their physical locations. And they didn't really have a backup plan for their online channels, right? Which has created a problem and something that Betsy just mentioned, where a lot of the sort of like online focused fintech companies have been gaining a lot of share, right? I think, the other interesting thing that we just look at and think about is the CARES Act really created a plan for smaller institutions to win back SMB assets, right? SMB loans. But this wasn't the same for deposits, right? Which are really their core relationships. And if you actually look at Q2, $2 trillion surge of deposits happened, right? And 2/3 of those deposits went to the top 25 institutions. And that's a problem because community banks are behind, right? And the gap is truly widening. And what we actually saw through our platform was the opposite. Banks that were using Mantl, which essentially provides the online digital branch channel, we actually saw deposits grow about 700% across the platform. We had one bank, Happy State Bank, which is a community bank in Texas. They grew their checking accounts by 160%. Quantic, which is a bank in New York, they grew their online applications by 134%. So I think what that boils down to is it can work, and this segment of the financial institutions can certainly be big players. They just need to have the technology to get them there and ultimately compete.
Great, thank you. And Duane, do you agree, disagree? What would you like to add?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I come with a slightly different, from a different perspective on, the market where we're participating. Here at Tribal, we're really focused on helping startups succeed and grow their business. And of course, the pandemic really changed a lot. The big thing, I think it was, the point that Betsy made earlier was very much that, these trends were already in place in terms of digital. And I think this just made, digital from something that maybe was nice to have to absolutely mission critical. And so we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in the digital space. So our customers are, our customers run the gamut of a broad range of, small, medium business segments, everything from, transportation, logistic firms to medical firms to other types of startups. And what we've seen consistently is a really big increase in their spend on digital channels. And those ones that really had that footprint in place have done well through this, and other ones have worked hard to kind of regain that volume. So we've really seen just a very large uptick in terms of the amount of spend that's going through our platform on digital spend for their growth strategies. And I think many of them have reinvented themselves or already had that footprint as a tech 2.0 kind of startup and have been successful through the period. I think the other two things I would add that we've seen a lot of change around is just obviously the enterprise and the organizational drive is really gone from business continuity plans and remote working agreements to really making it successful. There's been just a lot more emphasis on the collaboration tools, obviously online events like this one, but just how the teams work and operate in a very dynamic, high, fast-paced environment where you're not really going into the office every day. And we're still seeing a tremendous amount of innovation kind of across the board. We're seeing new products, new services. There's a lot of really creative things coming to the market despite the pandemic. And I think, if anything, maybe the pandemic's actually, accelerated that move to digital, that move to, other ways of engaging in business models. So that's been great. And so I think I've been through a number of crises in the past, and every time you come through something like this, it really just underscores the importance of that resiliency and enterprise risk management too, just always kind of thinking, identifying how things can affect your business and adapting and really taking that seriously. And that's what we've really seen is just a greater emphasis on the planning adaptivity, if you will, to the changes.
Good answer. And I really appreciate the differences in your guys' businesses and some of the similarities. You all have different customers. I'm not going to address this to anybody, so just jump in if when you have an answer. But what are you guys hearing from your customers that they want or need most right now?
I'll just add on to that. As we're hearing daily,
just keep it rolling,
that they want to increase their growth on digital and online channels, right? It's, the integrations are really, becoming more and more of a bedrock of all businesses. And again, our customers are SMBs, they're micro corporates that, have usually venture-backed funding and are in some kind of stage of growth. And so those integrations to other parties and players are just more and more important, that open platform. And then, their ability to, be effective and adapt their business model, not just to acquiring customers through, digital targeting and advertising, but just the entire motion from origination through the whole customer journey, being able to have a end-to-end experience that now is delivered through, through mobile, through remote channels. And that's what we see. And we continuously see like a lot of demand for credit in that space, as well as other tools that help them expand in that way.
Got it.
Yeah,
Betsy, Nathaniel, you guys seeing anything similar, different?
yeah, just maybe to add on, I totally agree that, the need to sort of go online is very front and center. I think one of the problems that, our customers face, which are really the banks themselves, and obviously they serve the end customer at the end of the day, is that we need to help level the playing field for a certain extent, right? They are very reliant on legacy technology and have been for a very long time. And 96% of these community banks actually outsource their technology to third-party vendors. And the problem is that the technology doesn't meet the demand that their customers are expecting today, right? And that's a frictionless process. I don't want to walk into a branch and need to fill out all of these paper forms. And I want my business account to be opened in less than 2 weeks to 4 weeks. All of these different things that the end customer gets really frustrated about, that a lot of these banks aren't able to serve due to the technology that they have at their hands. And people want to do everything online, right? They want to be able to do it from their phone. They want to be able to do it from their computer. It doesn't mean that they don't want that human touch, and the human touch can be important and can be really impactful, and especially in more complex situations. But I think ultimately the goal is to help really close the technology gap that the banks who ultimately serve their end customers, close that gap so that they can do a better job serving them. And we see this all the time with a lot of the banks we work with. The one bank, for example, they were able to raise $100 million of deposits in 5 months, right? And that was basically how many deposits they would have raised with 10 branches over 5 years. So pretty amazing outcomes. And they were able to lower their customer base to sort of the 18-25 age group, which by launching this national brand. So I think it is there and the opportunity is there, and we can meet the sort of end customer demand. We really do have to fix the sort of underlying technology problem that a lot of these banks face.
Got it. And Betsy?
I would just sort of build on what Duane was saying. He made 2 comments, one around integrations and one around end-to-end experience. And while a different customer experience, it is what we hear consistently actually on both sides of our ecosystem. We keep getting asked, how quickly can we move? How quickly can we get integrated? How quickly can we get up and running? And we're hearing that both from the data providers, being the banks and the brokers, as well as the data recipients that are looking for the information. Everyone wants to move as quickly as possible so that we have the connectivity and the flow of data to power a really, really strong, secure and transparent end-to-end user experience. So.
Got it. So very interesting, sort of same yet different perspectives. What is everybody's number one priority now? So we've been in this process for a few months now. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty and doubt, and as we heard from Anu Schultes yesterday, that's a lot of what we're dealing with, especially as leaders of your firms. We don't know what necessarily the future brings. What are you guys focused on? How are you marshaling resources? What's your number one priority right now?
At least for us, it has to be the safety and happiness of our team to a large extent. And, we had about 30% of our employees that were actually working remote prior to COVID. And so moving to remote was actually fairly easy, but it really goes beyond that. People are, it's a completely new world out there. It's super important to feel supported, be appreciative, even more so in this current environment. So, I think from a people perspective, that's our number one priority. I think on the business perspective, and I think you guys touched on it, it's how can we drive down the time of implementation to onboard customers more quickly, right? Because they are sort of faced with this problem of, we didn't have this thing and now suddenly we need to have this thing. We need to drive down the time that it takes to get them onboarded. So we've been investing in that. And then we've also been investing in really just product development at the end of the day to help our customers better serve their customers.
Duane,
okay, so you took the words out of my mouth. So first and foremost, it's everybody's health, safety, sanity on some days as well. The Akoya team, because we were incubated within Fidelity, was stood up as actually remote from day one, even within the confines of Fidelity. So basically, as of March 12th, we went effectively 100% remote and continue to be so and continue to be so for the foreseeable. I happen to be someone that worked remote already because I'm New York based and we're a Boston based company. So, so it was kind of some regard business as usual. Or business as unusual. But like Nathaniel also, we are focused on how do we move things faster? How do we move through our pipeline from an integration perspective faster? Because we are a mission-based business in terms of solving for the login credential sharing issues. And that continues to be our number one priority is how do we solve for that? And the best way we can do that is get as many folks into the ecosystem and on the platform and integrated with the flow of data going. So that continues to be there. It is definitely doing it in a very different way in that everybody is remote. We are all remote. Our data recipients are all remote. Our financial institutions that we're working with, they're all remote. So it's, taken some time to learn how to easily switch from Zoom to WebEx to Teams to Chime to you name it. But it definitely is, we are continuing to remain focused very much on our mission. Got it.
And Duane, are you seeing something similar?
Yeah, I mean, obviously taking care of our staff first. I mean, we started out, we're a small business and already we're pretty globally spread out. So we have teams in different locations that had gone fully remote pretty much from the start. So it worked well. And we had been pretty early adopters of a lot of the more, advanced kind of collaboration tools and techniques to be able to work in that environment. So that's kind of gone well for us. But I think the thing that we've really been focusing on the most is just really listening to our customers. And I think Nathaniel mentioned a little bit around that product fit and product development. We've been really spending a lot more time understanding and listening to our customers and how they're reacting and their demands. Again, many startups in global markets are, the banking system doesn't always serve them very well. The ability to access different kind of payment tools, the ability to make kind of payments and having access to modern financial products isn't always as easy as you may think. And so we listen very deeply to them, and we've been doing a lot more interviewing and engaging with them and then making refinements on our products and services just to make sure that we're filling that need. And so that's really been the main thing. We don't see, I think, despite the reports, globalization really isn't dead. Many of our customers are really trying to do more and more work on a global marketplace. And so a lot of emphasis in terms of breaking down barriers, in terms of allowing startups to do business with the world. And I think the pandemics, I think, actually accelerating that trend as well, just in the the emergence of tools, digital networks, open banking, open frameworks. It's something pretty exciting to see. And I think obviously the pandemic has quickened that tempo, but I think that's where we're focusing a lot, is just really understanding those needs and trying to refine our offering to meet that.
It's so interesting. Like if we were in the travel industry, this conversation, the tenor of this conversation would be totally different, right? Like, so we happen to be in, this is in full respect to all the terrible things going on, but like we happen to be, all of us, in a sector where there's an uptick in activity and interest and stuff like that. Before the break, we had Scott Spector, whose firm, he has an architectural design firm, does a lot of work in terms of redesigning bank branches and bank facilities. And one of the things he said is, for sure in the future, he's working with Citi and JP Morgan Chase, and like the branches are going to be smaller. And a lot of our speakers have said, branches aren't going away, but their role is going to be different in the future. So what do you guys think, particularly in this scenario, like what is the role of the bank branch in the future? Tough one, hot potato, huh?
Yeah,
well, what does banking look like with a de-emphasis on branches? Let me put it that way.
I think it looks like the world looks today, actually. In terms of, I walked past a branch in my neighborhood the other day during business hours, and Their vestibule was open with basically drop boxes. If you had this, drop here. If you had this, drop here. And if you needed support, pick up the phone and call. So I think it looks a little like it does today. My response may be a little skewed because I live and breathe in a digital world as it relates to the technology that we provide. But I think, I don't disagree. There's always a time and a place for that personal interaction and that element of having a human touch experience to it. But I think, bringing more robust, stronger tools online for folks, allowing, kind of back to the Akoya mission, aligning where you can get data securely through. So whether it's you use an all digital bank, you guys had the folks from Dave on the panel and, as a speaker earlier today, and we look at how the fintechs are being embraced. Those tools are great, and we need to make sure that folks can continue to use them, have access to them, and have access to them in a secure and transparent manner, so that all that data flows for the benefit of the shared customer.
I'm curious, Betsy, also if you think that your response is colored by the fact that you live in New York.
Probably. Though I will say I spent the first 75 days of the pandemic actually in Florida hiding. But it probably is very much skewed by the fact that I myself bank digitally, and I live in Manhattan. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. What do you guys think? Duane, Nathaniel?
I definitely agree that, I don't think branches are fully going away, but I do think they are changing drastically and will play a different role. It is very similar to the retail industry to a certain extent, right? You see sort of these direct to consumer companies that started online, Casper, for example, and even Amazon, right? It's not that they haven't layered in physical locations, because they very much have. They just become another channel, but not the only channel, right? Which is sort of how banking has evolved historically. Branches have been the primary marketing hub within the community to really drive traffic. I think it will be a complement to their overall services. And ultimately what the bank's responsibility is to meet their customers where they are, right? Some people will want to walk into the branch. Some people will want to do it themselves at home. Some people will want a relationship manager coming down to their office and sitting down. And that having that flexibility, but also maintaining those different channels, I think is super important. And look, ultimately, what is being reimagined right now is banking infrastructure, right? It's reimagining the customer experience. It's reimagining how back office operations work. There's no reason why what you do in the branch shouldn't be exactly the same as what you do online, right? And I think banks are, struggling with that concept, but trying to push towards that reality, because ultimately it makes them a much more efficient business. If you look at the stats though, today only 20% of businesses or banks have online account opening. That's a pretty staggeringly low number. And that means a lot of them are heavily branch-based and have a lot of branches. I think the other piece of it is, even within the 20% that have online account opening, the average abandon rate on the application is about 80%. So that means they're losing every 8 out of 10 customers that are coming through the door. That's a huge problem, right? And we need to reverse that. And that's obviously something that Mantl works on very deeply and tries to focus on. And we've had banks like Cross River, for example, who have seen 88% net conversions. That's basically flipping it on their head, where they're onboarding 9 out of 10 customers. And that's immensely valuable and ultimately really cost savings for them. And as I said, banks have to meet their customers where they are. We have to reduce the friction. Definitely don't think branches are going away, but they are certainly evolving. And I think the technology within the branches are going to change over time to help facilitate that.
Amazing. Duane, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think the digital aspect of it just comes back again. A world without bank branches. We've started without bank branches in mind. We're a fintech ourselves. We've seen tremendous growth going digital from the start. We've seen over 400% growth in spend on our platform since January through the crisis. And it's all through digital decisioning, and it happens very quickly. Now, I know that's not for all segments and it's not for all populations. We have a particular customer base that we're targeting that's very tech savvy to begin with. But that's kind of how we see it, and we have gone into business not really planning a branch model. And I think the dirty little secret around digital is that it's hard. The technologies are there, but you have to really spend a lot of time and attention to detail to get the customer experience right. And there's just so many variations of customer demand and customer experience through your process. So my view is, the future of a world without, bank branches. I haven't been in a bank branch much in a long time. I don't know a lot of people that are going into bank branches today. I still think there's a role for bank branches. I'm sure they'll be here for a long time, but I still think they become part of that overall customer experience. And how do you manage that customer experience so that ultimately you've anticipated what the customer needs, what their expectations are, what problem are they trying to solve in the branch, and your digital experience is all just a means to kind of meeting those end needs of your customers. So, and then going back to that dirty little secret, I think there's an awful lot of emphasis on really having an agile ability to be able to adapt quickly, to understand what your customers' needs are and evolve that experience so it's very frictionless. It anticipates their needs. They see it serving their needs, and it's really built around what the customer is looking for. And so I see the branch really as just one aspect of that whole customer experience and how businesses will go to market. And whatever kind of bank it is, I think the branch will play that kind of role, and digital be just a very central part of that experience.
Yeah, very well explained. We have time for one last question, and that we spent a lot of time talking about, I guess, what has changed, talking about the present. I'm interested in hearing from each of you about how you're thinking about the future. What are you prioritizing? Products, services, whatever. But I want you guys each to take a look towards the future. Who's going to go first?
Yeah. So at least for us, we sort of see the next wave of fintech disruption is really aimed at, I would say, one, the legacy infrastructure, and two, commercial banking. And I think we are in a really interesting time in that the unbundling of banking infrastructure is happening right now, right? And we sort of saw this over the past years with the unbundling of financial products when you had companies like, Simple and Acorns and all of these different consumer-focused companies popping up. And that was sort of the unbundling of the consumer financial products. That's exactly what we're seeing with the legacy infrastructure right now. And really, in order to unwind it, because it's a behemoth, right? You can't unwind it overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to take many players doing many different pieces of those things to ultimately get them. So I think that is something that's very top of mind for us, and where I think a lot of the industry is heading. I also think we see a lot of opportunity and innovation happening within the commercial banking space. I think business banking and commercial banking is something that really hasn't been touched for a very long time. And, a lot of the sort of consumer products were the ones that were being focused on first. And then for a business banking product, you might just slap the consumer product, but didn't really meet the needs of the business customer. And, I think that is starting to change for the better, which is really great because businesses just need a tremendous amount of different services to be successful. And I think when we think about it, it starts in the onboarding, right? How do you take a process that takes 2 to 4 weeks to onboard a business at a traditional bank down to instantaneously or same day, right? That is very possible now. And I think, if you can get efficient with the onboarding perspective, you can really start to drive tremendous growth for the bank. And then you need to sort of layer in a lot of the servicing functions that help that business succeed and really operate over time.
That makes a lot of sense. Duane, Betsy, what are you guys working on for the future?
Duane,
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, sure. I mean, here at Tribal, we're really excited just to continue really growing and scaling the niche that we're in. We see a tremendous demand in our space, and it really builds on something Nathaniel just mentioned. For startups and corporates, a lot of the banking solutions just really aren't very effective. There's a lot of broken processes and pieces, especially as you look outside of the developed markets, where we're really focused on largely emerging markets and helping those kind of companies. And so we're really focused on that ability to grow and meet that need, and that's what we're doing. And I would just say a big part of that, which also connects to the previous point around many partners or players. We're working with a lot of different partners to make this happen. There's a very rapidly changing environment. Regulatory changes are occurring. The technology stack is changing continuously. Customer expectations are changing. So really just trying to build our own organization to meet that and adapt to a continuous high rate of change, and recognizing that you can be very successful building and working with a lot of partners. And so we're developing partners as whether it's in terms of the integrations that we use to extend our platform, or the integrations we use to improve our underwriting, or the algorithms we're using to better underwrite or assess or identify customers. I think that recognition that partnerships can be very effective and a great way to scale and grow is something that we're continuing to work on. But again, it's all coming back to an eye towards, we see an opportunity, we see a demand, we see a lot of great customers out there that are not being well served, and we're trying to service that through bringing that all together and marshaling these resources to make it work.
Great. Betsy, you want to bring us home?
Sure. I'm just going to take a similar, different lens, but similar to what Nathaniel was saying about, solving for legacy infrastructure. When I think about it in terms of the consumer experience, how do we think about ways to make data, get the data out there, make it accessible, and do so with industry standards? I think we need to look for industry collaboration towards common standards for things like API specs, network agreements to make it easier and faster from an onboarding perspective, standardized security assessment vehicles as it relates to data being shared and data flowing through from a financial institution to a data recipient, and making sure that consumer permissioning piece is standard. So I think we look to some of the lessons learned from the European models around open finance and help drive those so that we define those solutions in a way that work for all the constituents in the ecosystem in terms of the providers and the recipients, as opposed to it being mandated on us. And how do we find that common ground? Because I think that this new normal and wherever the future of branches goes, and I think the online experience, the digital experience, it's not going away. It's only going to become more prevalent in some regards, and finding ways where we can collaborate between, and address some of the friction that sometimes exists between a fintech and a financial institution, and making sure everyone has that shared customer and wants to have a stellar user experience. And how do we get to that through collaboration and more standards of how things flow through, is sort of where Akoya is planting a flag and where we're running for the future.
I'd like to thank everybody. Duane, Betsy, Nathaniel, thank you for joining us on the Outlier Opinion Maker panel. It was a great conversation for me, and it was really an honor that you guys addressed the Resilience Conference. So thank you guys very much.
Thanks for having us.
We're going to take a break now for 5 minutes, and we'll be back with the presentation of the Resilience Awards in 5 minutes. See everybody then.
Thanks.
Thank you.